Cyber Innovations in the Private Sector highlights case studies and the latest industry trends from private vendors. Explore innovative solutions, success stories, and exclusive insights from industry leaders. Stay ahead with the cutting-edge developments driving the industry forward.
Welcome to a new episode of CyberSecTV. Today joining us is Malcom Portelli, CISO of Andaria Financial Services. Malcom brings a cross-sector IT background with a current focus on cybersecurity awareness, risk governance, and the regulatory impact of emerging technologies. Malcom, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Malcom, can you please tell us about yourself and how did you end up being a CISO of a financial company?
Sure. So I've always been interested in technology from a very young age. And I ended up working in technology, starting kind of from the bottom, first line support, systems administration, moving up for the past about 20 years now. And I actually landed in security by mistake. So I was working at an organization which opened up a security department, and essentially I was poached from the technology department and moved into the security department. I had been working on security for a long time in that company before the security department opened up, in my capacity within the technology department. And I'll never look back. We're working in security for just over 8 years now. Been at Andaria as the CISO for 3.5 years now. So I'm building the security platform internally, building the policies, procedures, implementation of security measures, all of that. And I'm generally very passionate about security. So it's I love what I do.
Okay, Malcom, let's start with the human factor in cybersecurity. As phishing and engineering remains top threats, how has the approach to cybersecurity awareness evolved in the age of remote work and AI-generated attacks?
The evolution, I would say, in terms of educating people on new types of attacks that can take place. So AI, it enables more people to have access, tools to create better tactics in the form of social engineering. So if we are able to teach and educate and improve the knowledge of our users, our employees, our clients, whoever it may be, on how to protect themselves against these attacks, we can make leaps and bounds in reducing the effectiveness of the attacks.
What concerns you most about the rapid integration of AI into financial systems?
The main things that concern me is more on the levels of misuse, so the misuse of AI. And what I mean by that is incorrect implementation of AI systems being developed very quickly without people taking into account security by design principles, the security implications of the implementation of AI systems. So the speed at which these systems are being developed, being integrated into legacy systems, replacing legacy systems, concerning if the people who are developing these systems are not taking into account the security at the design phase, but also the security as they go on developing it. So it boils down to like developing any system, really. When you're developing a system, you need to take into account security at the beginning, at inception, when you're designing the system, and ensure that there's a framework for security checks throughout the whole development system. And then once it's in place, obviously you need to do vulnerability management like you would do in any application. So those are, I think, major concerns in terms of the implementation of AI. It's also on the flip side, the use of these tools, ensuring that people are using them properly and securely.
Are current security frameworks agile enough to address emerging AI-based threats like deepfakes or synthetic identity frauds?
I think we need to enhance the current frameworks that we have. A lot of work is being done, regulatory bodies, and by the people developing standards, like NIST, for example, in the US. They are taking into account AI systems and how the current frameworks can evolve to tackle AI systems. And I might sound like a broken record here, but it always boils down to the education. So frameworks work and they're important, but if we don't understand the systems and we don't ensure that the people using the systems understand the systems, then they are going to be misused. And the framework is great, and frameworks are really important when you put them in place, but there also needs to be tweaks to ensure that people are able to use them properly, and the frameworks are implemented in a way that they can evolve. So if you're implementing a framework that doesn't take into account AI, the basic principles are always the same when it comes to security. Cloud system, whether you're securing an AI system, whatever you're securing, the baseline principles are the same in terms of access control, in terms of auditing, all of that is the same. But then obviously the functionality changes, and as the system grows, the potential for misuse also grows. So again, it boils down to the education and knowledge factor.
Is the current regulatory landscape keeping pace with security demands of AI-powered digital economy?
From a security perspective, probably not as fast as it should be from a regulatory perspective. I mean, if we take the EU, so the EU, as usual, is ahead in the game from a regulatory perspective on a global scale. They always are. And in fact, the emergence of the AI Act was a very important milestone, not so much for security, but for privacy. So in terms of protection of the individual, ensuring that systems that are deemed to be high risk are given the correct controls to make sure that the individual is protected, which is important. And it does tie into security, because I like to think of data protection and security to be very closely linked to each other. So the fact that the AI Act is taking into account the rights of the individual and the protection of the individual is important. And even the way that they did it, it makes sense in terms of the classification of systems. You don't do a one-size-fits-all approach, because that doesn't work when you're developing systems. You have the high-risk systems which need a level of controls, but then you've got the lower-risk systems which don't need as many stringent controls as those high-risk systems. And that, I feel, it has a good balance of protecting the individual, but also not stifling innovation, which has been a big criticism when it comes to European markets, especially recently. But these kind of regulations are good for both, in my opinion, to enable people developing lower risk systems to not be stopped by unnecessary controls.
And Malcolm, what do you think about the digital sovereignty of EU services in cybersecurity?
I believe in fostering innovation within the EU. I think it's super important, and I think it's something that we really need to focus on. As governments, as industry, it's something we need to push on, because I mean, I'm not going to say something controversial here, but we've fallen behind. The EU has fallen behind the rest of the world in terms of innovation. You know, companies that generate value, not just monetary value, but also, spreading, creating tools that actually are capable of being used at multiple companies and multiple industries and all of that. That in terms of fostering innovation, creating new ecosystems within the EU. I think it will be very difficult for EU companies to move away completely from foreign vendors. Microsoft, Google, Amazon Web Services, these are major players in the game, and they have the biggest footprint from a, let's say, cloud computing perspective. We've got a major footprint. So I would reframe it in terms of foster innovation, get the EU to become an innovation engine, to create those great companies, to push them up, to give them the support that they need.
What new security risks come with the proliferation of digital wallets and decentralized payment platforms?
So from a digital world perspective, and again, this all boils, I'm going to go back to regulation. The EU really implemented some important security features, taking into account the Payment Services Directive 2, so PSD2, whereby they enforce secure customer authentication whenever you're viewing your wallet, making transactions. So that was a really important thing to implement. And I see a lot of companies outside of the EU that they're falling behind from a security perspective in the financial services sector, for example, a lot, because they don't need to do these things, so they don't do them, which obviously, I'm biased because I am a security guy, is the wrong approach to take. You don't do them because you have to, you do them because you need to, you should. And in terms of future risks, there are new ways of interacting with payments and digital wallets. And we see, let's take embedded finance, for example, because that's kind of where we operate as Andaria. Embedded finance is a relatively new part of the finance ecosystem, and there are new challenges. It's a new sector. There are new challenges, new ways of interacting. It's not just a kind of end client to payment company interaction. There are many, in between businesses and different partnerships that are made, and that is a lot of data moving around in different directions. So controlling that data flow and making sure that you've got the right controls all the way through all those hops is going to be a challenge. But it's a challenge that is possible to solve 100%. There are many technologies these days that you can implement to solve these problems, to make sure that, number one, the communication is secure throughout. Number two, you're protecting the user from things like fraud, which is a major problem these days. It always has been, but it's getting worse and worse. Affecting a lot of vulnerable people, affecting non-vulnerable people through separate channels. We're seeing fraud coming through instant messaging apps that have nothing to do with the payment applications. So there are many channels where fraudsters and attackers can get into that do not have direct access to the payment platform. So those are major challenges that I see from a payments perspective.
Finally, if you had the regulatory pen for a day, what one policy would you implement to future-proof European cybersecurity?
This is actually an easy one for me to answer, I'll be honest, because I've thought about it a lot. And for me, the one thing I would do is mandatory information security in schools. Start them young. So, like we teach kids history, geography, maths, we need to teach them how to be secure. We need to teach them how to understand at least the basics of the internet. We need them to understand that when you post something to the internet, it's out there forever. You cannot get it back. We need to teach them how to secure their credentials. We need to teach them how to look out for scams. We need to teach them how to use AI tools responsibly. We need to teach them the importance of data protection for them. So all of these things. So that would be my main thing. I think we need to mandate schooling and education from a security perspective, security, data protection. Those are the main things, because we do teach IT, ICT in schools. All schools have ICT. All schools these days have computers. Back when I was younger, it was a novelty to have a computer at the school. Nowadays, locally here, for example, children are being given tablets within school so that can help them with their learning. So why are we not teaching them how to use these tools, these tablets, these PCs, the internet responsibly, and how to protect themselves, and how to take that back home and teach their parents how to protect themselves? So that's the one thing I would implement. I think it will have a huge impact on the overall European cybersecurity ecosystem, and it might actually encourage more and more young people to go into information security as a career as well.
And this was Malcom Portelli, CISO from Andaria Financial Services. And I hope to see you soon in the next episode of CyberSecTV.